Let's get more on the final days of the campaign. We are joined now by Carlos Watson, the founder and CEO of Ozy Media, and Catherine Rampell, a columnist for the Washington Post. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
We are here. We are in the final days.
It's getting close.
So they say.
Yeah, so they say.
Right. Well said.
Carlos, what does this election look like going into the final weekend?
Clearly, the lead has shrunk. Not that long ago, Hillary Clinton seemed on the edge of a double-digit lead. Now it's probably 3 points, maybe 5 points, depending on which polls you believe. And what's interesting is the number of swing states seem to have expanded. There were states like Michigan, Colorado, Virginia, that she seemed to have some confidence that she was going to win and could focus her time on Florida and Pennsylvania. And guess what? She's now campaigning in those states, either in person or with ads on the air. So it's clearly gotten tightened. The battlegrounds expanded. And, of course, we saw Mr. Trump proclaiming a lead, or at least some confidence, in more places than previously expected.
Catherine, what do we account for this tightening? Is it Trump staying on message? Is it the FBI director's email announcement? What do you think has contributed to
It's probably primarily the FBI director's announcement about additional emails that were discovered that are being examined right now. Trump is certainly trying to stay on message. He had this very funny, in my view, comment, I think it was yesterday, where he said something like, "Stay on point, Donald. Stay on point. Don't get sidetracked." It's like his inner monologue has
Stay on prompter.
Yes, has suddenly
Personal
become
coaching.
has become external, presumably because he has been told many times by Kellyanne Conway or whoever else is coaching him right now that it's very important that he stays on point.
You know, we've talked a lot about voter turnout going into this final weekend and into the final days. What are we seeing in terms of voter turnout and what we might expect because of so many unfavorables out there? You know,
three really interesting things. First, early voting has surged. Already 33 million Americans have voted. We might see north of 50 by the time we get to Tuesday, either in person or via absentee ballot. So that's a big deal. A third of the vote, maybe as much as 40%. Second, African-American turnout seems to be down, and hence you see not only Secretary Clinton, but a number of key surrogates in places like Cleveland and Detroit and Miami and other places trying to encourage that vote, knowing that can make the difference. And then third, the Clinton folks are trying to read the tea leaves in places like Florida, where Hispanic vote early turnout has been higher than expected, and they're hoping that's good news, but they can't be sure. And so that's going to be an interesting one to watch. Mr. Trump can't get to 270 or so, it seems, without Florida's 29 electoral votes.
Which is, this turnout issue is interesting, Catherine, because, I mean, you're looking at two candidates with historically high unfavorable ratings, and yet the early voting turnout looks to be high. I mean, how do you account for that?
Well, the early voting is obviously not the full account of all of the voting. And I think there is concern that people will stay home on Election Day because they're not particularly enthused by either of the candidates. You know, you think about marginal voters like younger voters who have in the past swung states in the Democrats' favor. You know, this is a core part of the Democratic coalition. And they are still drawn to third-party candidates. They are not particularly excited about the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton. And if they decide to stay home, this is the big wild card here, that could have a big effect on the overall outcome.
Yeah, we saw so much millennial support, obviously, for Bernie Sanders, and that's now what the Clinton camp is going after. One of the things we've seen in recent days is more of this negative campaigning, especially on the part of Hillary Clinton.
Sure. You know, I think clearly when seeing your lead erode in that way, she did the same thing in the closing days of her primary battle against Bernie Sanders, trying to make voters, in her words, imagine what the world could look like. And I think she's doing the same here. They call it contrasting politics is important. And so we'll see if that continues. The other thing I'll point out, though, because Catherine raised a really interesting thing about millennials, very interesting new thing that's happening on college campuses. Some college campuses are allowing early voting in person on the campuses.
Right.
So in the same way that you've seen that for years at senior centers, and that's led to a disproportionate number of senior voters, campuses like the University of Georgia are now allowing that. Could lead to a little bit of a surprise, maybe something to watch.
Yeah, the turnout question is, that's what you hear more from pollsters everywhere is these, you know, particularly with Hispanics, is what's the turnout going to be? Because they seem to be able to forecast it. Yeah,
it's about who shows up. And one of the other wild cards in this election is that Hillary Clinton has a much better ground game.
Yes.
Or so it is believed anyway. I mean, she's been in politics for a long time than Donald Trump has. So to what extent do the polls actually reflect who will come to the ballots, to the polls on Tuesday? It's a big question right now.
All right, Catherine Rampell, Carlos Watson, thanks both for being here.
Thank you.
Tomorrow morning on Face the Nation here on CBS, John Dickerson's guests will include Reince Priebus, chairman of the Republican National Committee, and CBS News will have full election night coverage beginning at 7 Eastern this Tuesday.